Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property in no particular order. I'm your host, Ross Stockdale, owner and fractional chief marketing officer at Thunderstock Marketing, bringing to you our special guest today, Adam W. Barney. Adam is an energy coach. He's the author of Make Your Own Glass Half Full, The Path to Empowered Optimism and Autonomy, and he's a dedicated advocate for empowering leaders to achieve their full potential. Adam, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much for making the time to come on. How are you doing today? And what brings you onto the podcast?
I'm trying to stay warm, Ross. It's, of course, late January, so that's the key. But thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here just because what we're about to discuss, could change the approach for our listeners to work in life. That's really what I'm excited about being here. And I know you mentioned energy coach. I'd love to say that's about mystical stones and sorcery. Maybe I'll bring that into my coaching practice in the next, 5 or 10 years, but it's about how I've worked with hundreds of both emerging and executive leaders and, worked on designing the vision and the systems that goals sit within, and then keep them energized and accountable, be a cheerleader in their back pocket and, help people no matter what their background or history or experience is to stay energized and accountable towards those goals.
So how did you get started doing what you're doing with this energy coaching, this optimism? What's your background?
Sure. It's honestly been quite a journey. I spent over 2 decades in a nonlinear corporate marketing career, managing teams across both startups and all the way to large scale global enterprise companies. And I was always focused on helping people grow and thrive. What I really realized early in those days was I was working in the big agency world. I was managing teams of 20 plus people, and it was always about those employees, whether they were junior, mid-level, or even approaching senior level. It was always about, of course, giving them the tools to succeed in their day-to-day job. But my approach was always, how can I help you get to the next job and then the job after that? And then, a couple other pieces in that journey. In that corporate career, I was laid off twice. The first time was due to a sales team reorganization. I got absorbed in that. The second time was due to a global 4% workforce reduction. And both of those experiences, I pulled up my bootstraps and I used the tools of optimism and autonomy, which are ingrained within myself to lift back out of that. The first time I was laid off, I actually picked up the pieces and launched a boutique marketing agency that was just me, myself, and I here in Boston, pounding pavement. Then the second time it happened, it kicked off this long journey to building this coaching practice. But really, what pushed me into coaching was a deeply personal experience that happened just over 10 years ago, where I lost my mom to ALS. And that didn't,
Mm.
teach me only some of the most importance in my life about resilience in the face of challenges and the power of optimism and how energy is the foundation for everything we do. It led me on this path to really get involved with some things outside of that allure of darkness, and that's a chapter in the book that I love to spend time talking about. I lifted back up out of that, right? And it led me to get involved with things like the ALS Development Institute outside of Boston, which is the world's only ALS-focused research organization out there. And then secondarily, it led me to actually become involved with a familial ALS study out of the University of Miami Neurological Department. Those are opportunities that would not have been open to me, as sort of vexing and backwards as it seems, had I not lost my mom to that disease. So that's just one example of, on a personal level, how I've picked up the pieces, and it's helped me. All of those experiences helped me realize that so much of what we strive for, whether it's success or growth or fulfillment, can really only happen when we have the energy to show up fully. So, what I love to do through my coaching is I help people become what I call the fully optimized human. It's about aligning your energy, your values, and your goals so that you can create something that's meaningful and build that path to success in a sustainable manner. And that's, whether it's an entrepreneur who's scaling their business or a leader trying to inspire their team, the first step is really always the same. Get that energy in check, right? And then work on that vision that keeps you energized and accountable.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your mother, and it sounds like you've made the most of what I call the 90-10 rule, which is life is 90% of how you react to it and 10% of what happens to you. So, let me ask, you said that that was around the same time as the second layoff, and that was around the same time that you started the coaching. What came first? Not the chicken or the egg, but between, that event with losing your mother or the coaching? Did one come from the other, or did they sort of come at the same time?
I think it just added, you know, the roundabout way to answer that question, Ross, is they each impact each other, right? It goes back to my philosophy with my coaching as well, that every individual that I work with has a unique set of experiences that have led them to where they are today. And I don't think it's about necessarily which one happened first or which one happened second. They happened concurrently, but they allowed me to build that perspective that led me to this make your own glass half full mindset, right? And the fact that, one of the most stereotypical ways that people are described in the world that we don't choose, we're either a glass half full or a glass half empty person, right? And my perspective is, screw that, throw the glasses over your shoulders. You can make your own glass half full using those tools of optimism and autonomy.
Mm.
And that's about these shared experiences that build. I have one of my favorite visualizations. It's posted up on the wall here next to my desk. I've had it here for about 5 years. It comes from Tim Urban, who writes Wait But Why,
Hmm.
and it's about life paths. And it's a simple time chart that has today in the center of it, and you've
Yeah.
got your life paths before today with a black line amongst a bunch of wiggly green lines, and then look into the future, and those lines all wiggle. It's all about, as you mentioned, Ross, how you react to what happens to you, and all of that builds that path to where you end up today and what leads you into the future.
Well, I love that. For those of you that are listening in audio, I'm not going to pull it up, but on my Instagram, I actually posted that exact same graphic. One of the last times I was in Boston, I was at Inbound, HubSpot's annual marketing conference, and Tim Urban actually spoke there and presented. So
That's awesome. I was
Wait But
really
Why is a great content. He's a great content creator. Um, I think what he does exceptionally well is takes these incredibly heady concepts, and he makes these graphics that really simplify it. And not to belabor the point of Wait But Why and Tim Urban per se, but I love the idea that you know you've said it before about picking yourself up by your bootstraps, and people don't like that cliche. They don't like the cliche of half empty or half full. You're either a pessimist or an optimist. You're like, it sounds like from you, it's like you create your own opportunity, you create your own luck, and life's what you make it. And I think it's really empowering, especially for those that get afflicted by, whether it's everyone in life has difficulties and troubles, and whether they want to call it trauma or not, everyone has their own crap going on, but it's what happens on the other side of how you react to that really matters. So um to that point, you said you've been coaching now for 10 years. You've been at this.
No, I've had this, I mean, I've been coaching, I would argue, since I was a, leader in the marketing agency space. I've had this formal coaching practice for just about 4 years
4 years now, okay. But you've been doing the coaching for longer. Let me ask you, when, and I'll share a personal detail. Within the same quarter that I launched this business, I lost my mother to, well, she went blind from Leber's disease, but she was killed in a car accident. So I can totally relate to the timing. It's like, which came first, this or that? Oh, it was concurrently, right? I was launching the
now.
business, and I had that personal experience. And what I found was I could sit around and be introspective and grieve and be sad, but it didn't make me feel better necessarily. Like, it's good to process emotions. Everyone should do that.
Right.
what made me feel better was helping other people,
Right.
you know, putting out good energy out into the world. So when you're looking for clients to help, what are some of the things that you've found of the dozens, if not hundreds of people you've helped that they have in common that makes their life more optimized or their goals more likely to be achieved? What are
Right.
some character traits?
Oh my gosh. I mean, even going back, Ross, to those early teams that I would build and the people that I would hire, it was always focused on that. It's not about it's not about necessarily believing that that path that you step on is going to lead to the top of the mountain, which I apologize for the graphic behind me because that's that graphic. But it's about knowing that if you stay focused, it's about that flexibility and that ability to learn that's driven by if you stay focused on that path of where your mindset and your vision goes, even if it feels like that path is either at a plateau or it's going down, you keep marching straight ahead on that path to what drives you and you don't go too far to the left or the right off the path. Eventually that's going to lead to success. And that's where I think about that flexibility piece of it. And it comes into this idea really that energy and flexibility to learn and use that energy is the foundation for productivity and success. For instance, I'll say, Ross, if you're the CEO of a company or you're an executive leading a team, you can implement time management tools out the wazoo. But if you don't have the energy to execute on the plans, no amount of that scheduling will save you or help you succeed, right? So that's where I step in, and if you've got that right perspective for growth, that's ultimately I think what opens it up. Then I like to dig into something I teach that's called energy mapping, right? And it's all about identifying no matter what's going on in your day, and this can evolve also as you get older and your circumstances change and your responsibilities change. But it's about identifying when your peak energy hours are, the times of day when you're naturally most focused, most productive. For instance, if you're someone who feels the most energized the second you step out of bed in the morning, that's the time to tackle your biggest, most creative or most energy reducing tasks. And then the valuable, flip side of that is to save your more administrative, repeatable work for when your energy dips in the afternoon.
Interesting. Yeah, I've found that doing any incredibly mentally taxing work before 9 a.m. for me is a huge waste of time and not productive. From someone that's been as a fractional CMO and owner, uh, I found that execution beats planning every single time. Now, if your execution is right on par with your planning, even better.
Yep.
But the organizations I've been a part of, whether it's been as a W-2 employee or as a fractional and stepped into other organizations that I haven't owned, that have been focused on the minutia or the detail or like live and die by the calendar. And, it's just been, for lack of a better term, micromanagement. You
Yep.
see the energy from employees being just enough to not get fired or just enough to not get in trouble. But when you have companies that give more autonomy to employees to go and try new things and make mistakes and you won't get in trouble, the only foul play is, whether it's not doing your best or not telling the truth or not, bringing your whole self to work, and you encourage people to do those things, then it seems like the idea of the plan always gets improved versus falling back on the plan and using it as a measuring stick and a punishment rod. So
Right.
what are some of the things, Adam, in your career that you found to be, you talk about climbing the mountain, and everyone's mountain looks different depending on their goals. But for you, what are some of the peaks of the mountain you've been climbing so far in your journey?
Uh, I mean, one of the biggest peak, I have to say that the peaks always have a flip side with the valley at the same time, also, right? So One of the biggest peaks, of course, in the last year was having my first book published, right? Make Your Own Glass Half Full, The Empowered Path to Optimism and Autonomy. That's a big peak in this journey of building my coaching practice and also elevating myself, right? So that's one peak, but go back even to early days in my career, there were peaks. This is a time capsule thing to mention. I graduated from college with a management degree. I ended up getting my first job in my 20-year nonlinear corporate marketing career at a company, but the job was posted on Craigslist. It's bizarre, but that launched me into a 20-year nonlinear corporate marketing career. That ended up being a job at a venture capital backed startup in the infancy of digital marketing that had built a proprietary bid management engine for paid search campaigns. Talk about a, weird thing to just sort of stumble into that then led me into, working in the big agency world. I worked for Digitas, which of course is owned by the Publicis Group. That's where I started to build that leadership capability, work with Fortune 50 businesses, manage teams of 20 plus people, and really develop that leadership perspective that's allowed me to move into this coaching practice. I know I mentioned how I hired those employees back then, to ultimately prepare them for the next role and the role after that. It was about succeeding in the job that they had, but it was growth. That's a peak of the mountain. That was also a low valley in that big agency space. For instance, I was working with Bank of America through the 2008 financial crisis, and someone who really has always been driven by bringing more justice and equity to the world. It was tough to rectify in those days, working on behalf of a client who I would argue was making the world a worse place through their activity. And going home at night, in 2008, I didn't know that there was a better path or something I
Mm.
could do about that. So, even though that was a confusing point in time, it opened me up to this opportunity to understand how I could balance, but it also gave me the opportunity to communicate to C-level executives at a Fortune 50 kind of an environment and a client, right? So there's silver linings that you can find. And that's one of the things that I recommend with a lot of my clients who are in more of a transition space also, is the grass isn't really greener, on the other side of the fence. It's just a different shade of green. I've really always believed that the systemic structural things that we all face aren't going to be wildly different no matter where you go or what door you open or what you shift to. It's just a different framing of the challenges that we face. And that's where, I've developed a tool that focuses on micro restoration practices, right? So quick, simple ways to recharge during the day. Having two dogs in the house here, that's stepping outside for a few minutes and taking them for a walk, but it can be as simple as doing a quick breathing exercise. Everyone's unique in this world. I'm driven by music. I can put on that perfect song that energizes me and it lifts me back up. And those small actions are ways that can have a big impact on your focus and energy levels, even outside of those dips and the dips that we focus during the day. And it's about really delivering on that true habit of resilience and knowing that consistent practices can keep that energy more steady over the long haul. Of course, prioritizing sleep, moving your body every day, journaling, but it's all built at an individual level for what works to help keep you energized and engaged and moving forward.
How do you measure energy management and optimism within your own world? Like, how do you approach it for yourself? And then how do you communicate that to clients?
I mean, for myself, I can tell with those energy dips when I hit the right place. My prime time, I realized in writing the book to work was actually after the kids are in bed and
Mm,
between 8 and midnight. I realized that's when all the noise for me at that point in time drips away. I think it's the flip side to the flip side to how a lot of entrepreneurs work, where they get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And that's when they can find that quiet and that silence. One thing that I level set across myself, though, and my coaching clients also, and there are not many things in the world that level set every human on this planet, but one of them is we all only have 24 hours in the day. Think about some of the biggest, most successful business owners out there in the world. They have 24 hours in the day just like you do. That's a grounding realization to have, and it's all about using the time effectively, right? So that's where that comes into play. And then with my clients, I bring things like an energy audit tool to the forefront. If you're an entrepreneur or you're a fractional CMO like yourself, Ross, list out all of the tasks you have in front of you. No judgment on that list either. Assign an energy level that they each require. Does it require a low, a medium, or a high energy level? And then think about, are they things you can delegate? Are they things you can automate? Or even are they things you can eliminate? And then you
hmm.
start to make some progress and you elevate yourself through that approach as well.
I joined a group called Founder OS, led by Matt Gray. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Matt.
I was a part of Founder OS a few years ago. Yes, yeah, with
Oh, okay, cool. He had a tool in there that was similar to it was delegate, automate, eliminate, and then I forget what the last eight was, but it was probably something about like dominate or like make sure you do it. And it was during that time when I went through that checklist for my own self, my own business, that I realized I really needed to make my first hire. So I hired a virtual assistant to do a lot of the things that I could do, I knew how to do, I hated doing, wasn't a good use of my time, wasn't bringing me energy or really additional revenue. And since hiring her, I've probably 2 to 3x my practice, and that with just that one key, because I've had the potential to make more impactful swings at bat. Because it's really important to note for everyone listening that just because you read in Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week, or you follow these podcasts of entrepreneurs that have this millionaire morning routine of wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning and you do these things, doesn't mean it's for you. Because for as every success story that's out there that's just like that, there's somebody that could be just like you, where if you're like Adam or myself, the hours when the kids go to bed are the best for deep work, and I'm unbothered and unencumbered by other responsibilities. I can just focus and flow. But I've known people that their only hours are between 4 and 7, just the opposite side of the clock. So it sounds like to me one major key is doing that audit yourself, using the tools, being honest, and figuring out what works the best for each individual.
Well, and another piece of it, Ross, is I mean, I love to help enable that because it gives that accountability side of actually doing that work, and it takes time. It takes resources and space to do that.
Sure.
But that's the power of energy optimization. It creates that ripple effect that is not just in your life, but it's about the lives of the people you lead and the people that you work with, and even the clients that you have within your portfolio, right? That allows you to optimize more and and become more effective.
One thing that I've created as a tool is ranking and scoring your clients for not just how profitable they are, or not just how much success you can get them, but how much energy or how much you like them, right? Affinity, energy. I'm using those interchangeably in this instance. And when you do that, you start to realize some commonalities and trends for other business owners out there. And I've found that some of my best clients may not pay me the most per hour or maybe the highest retainer, but because I like them a lot, there's a positive correlation between the clients that give you energy and the ROI that they may get, right? So one example for me is I have a client that I spend the most time on, probably somewhere in the mid-range energy. Some days are better than others. Some days are grueling. Some days are cool, but on average, it's average. And we get pretty good results, decent results to hit our numbers. But the clients that I get fired up for, and I'm like, oh boy, I'm working on this today. I spend 1/10 the time. They might pay me more, and we get great,
Yep.
awesome results.
Right.
So
Right.
what is your feedback when it comes to, coaching executives, not just on the personal side of their energy, but when it comes to setting goals and when it comes to the greater organization?
I mean, it goes back to that professional vision, right? Of what you want to achieve, what you need to achieve. I was talking with one coaching client today about he's a CTO of a technology side of an organization that has 100 employees, right? And that's about concise communication. When you come from that, it's about understanding that background, right? What's that origin story of what has built that person, and then what does that vision look like? And that's where that visioning comes in. I love to use ikigai, right? The
Hmm.
Japanese concept for reason for being. If you come from the Matt Gray, world,
Very familiar.
that's I used that before joining the Founder OS program, and then I loved how Matt started to use it in his program as well.
Hmm.
But it pairs really strongly with what I also love to use, which is an Odyssey plan. And whether it's an entrepreneur or someone who's an executive in a large organization like that CTO that I just mentioned, that Odyssey plan is effective because it looks 5 to 10 years in the future. It's not a direct roadmap to where you're going to want to go,
Hmm.
but it's got three options. And one option is what you're doing remains consistent. The second option is option one just disappears. This is the alternative direction you would head. And then the third is a no limitations, no constraints. And 99% of the time, that Odyssey plan paired with that Ikigai, those aren't exact steps to take towards whatever that successful path is, but directionally, they point you in that space to build that system that then
Hmm.
those more tangible goals work within. And I like to
The
talk,
details fall into place after the big
the
pictures.
details fall into place. And then I like to provide that perspective as well. Envision yourself as Michelangelo, the famous Italian sculptor and artist. Imagine, no matter where you come from, that you have a 3-ton block of marble that's dropped in front of you, and think about how many tens of thousands of chisel marks does it take to turn that plain block of marble into a beautiful statue. It takes that resilience, and so many people get stuck at that. They get stuck between idea and action.
Mm.
But even more important than just action is staying on that path and continuing to stay resilient and marching ahead. That's the difference for so many people in the world.
One of the conversations that when I have to have it, it's always a matter of vision versus a matter of, tangible, true or false. When I'm doing a marketing campaign for someone and I preface it with, hey, this might technically take 6 to 8 weeks to build the foundation for this program. However, after 90 days, here's what normal looks like. And if you
Right.
compound that 90 days over time, it's reasonable to assume in 12 months, this is the result. And some clients are just hands off the wheel, full trust and great. And then they're overjoyed when we start to reap the fruit of that planted seed. Some clients are like, we've paid X amount into this so far. We haven't got any results. This is just a cost. This is just an expense. Is this working? And then the next week after having that conversation, will just be patient. It's like, oh, here's 2,000 new leads. You know, it's not how many leads we get per week because the first until you break ground, until you get out of there. So how do you approach the conversation? I don't want to call it patience, but it kind of is.
Yep.
But we both have children, right?
Right.
It takes 9 months on average, like just say on average, like let's for most people, it's like 9 months. So it's not like, hey, hurry up and finish the pregnancy.
Right.
You can't, you're either on track to give birth or you're not. So the goal is to have a healthy birth. But I think it's pretty similar to your analogy with the marble. But how do you help people to stay with the faith and stay patient?
It's being that cheerleader. That's what I love to do in my coaching. Number one, so many coaches out there will get you on, your coaching call for 40 minutes, right? Every 2 weeks or every month, whatever the case is in terms of the structure. The difference in my coaching practice is I follow up, right? And it comes from that marketing background. It's built on that. I'll actually follow up with an email or a message that gets into tools or resources or things that we covered that are going to help enable you to make that change. And then I'm built on communication. So many of my clients, they work in Slack. So I'll bring them into my Slack community, but I'm happy to work across text and email to be that person who goes, hey, I'm not going to yell at you for not getting this done, but have you focused on this? And that's the
Mm,
difference, right? That's where I like to sit in people's back pocket. If you can't afford my services or a coach right now, though, something I would recommend is to build that board of advisors, right? And those are people that you don't necessarily, not people that you've met, 6 weeks ago at a networking event.
mhm,
These are people who know you at a much deeper level, whether it's your roommate from freshman year at college, someone that you were seated next to in your first job, working, a longtime friend. That board of advisors is that lighter touch group that can help keep you energized and accountable. And number one, it gives you, if you're a solo entrepreneur, it can be a scary, lonely place to play, right? It gives you that support group to ensure that you're sitting to the center of what is driving you still, but you're making forward progress. And those are people who should openly be able to be comfortable to challenge you and to give you that constructive criticism over time. And that's what I love to do as well. I like to challenge people. I go back, Ross, to even some of those early marketing days. I always liked working with those clients who we needed to peel back layer after layer after layer of the onion before it became a really deeply invested partnership in terms of that client relationship. Those challenges always excited me. I've always, even internally, been driven. I'm not driven by outside competition, right? I'm driven by the internal competition that I have within myself. So when I like that deeper challenge that I need to work harder to get to the center of, that's where I get paid. That's where I pay off. And that's where, with my holistic long-term transformational coaching, it's a long way to answer again that question, but that's where I like to play. That's the position I like to be in. I like to be challenged in that sense, and know that this isn't going to be perfect the first conversation. It's going to take, I love to tell my coaching clients, it's going to take 8 weeks for us to get onboarded. I
mhm.
have to understand your origin. I have to understand your communication style. You have to make sure that we're marching in the right direction. There are checkpoints we have to hit off on before we get to that, really deep communication where it can transform not just the professional side, but the personal side and the holistic nature. There's a lot deeper investment that has to be made there, but it pays off so much more over the long term. I love to bring it back to a marketing lens, though. I always loved when I had a client say, let's turn off our branded keywords in paid search. Of course, paid search, it's all based on hand raiser traffic, right? What are the usually the most efficient keywords that you can buy in a paid search program? It's brand keywords. Clients, no matter whether they were a big financial services institution to an e-commerce client that delivered, that was totally online, when they said, let's turn off your brand keywords, I think so many different people would go, we're not, no, like, no, we're not going to do that. I was the one who goes, sure, let's turn it off and see what the impact
See
is.
what happens. Right. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's such a, I love that analogy. So, speaking of intrinsic motivation and being competitive with yourself, I love to ask this question. If you could have a conversation with your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self, So when you're just getting conscious of the world around you, and when you've experienced quite a bit of the world, and you've now at the twilight, how'd that conversation go? What would you like to say?
I would have to laugh at my 8-year-old self, Ross, because I was a shy kid, right? So
Really?
I up until probably about senior year of high school, freshman year of college, I was shy. I was quiet. I was reserved. I found something. And I was never really comfortable with that. I would say just keep keep resilient on that path. The other piece that I think pairs to that, when I was about years old, I'm not a big sports person. I'm definitely driven by music and learning far more, but I have this vivid memory at 8 years old playing for my little league baseball team. And I got called in to pitch the final out in the bottom of the ninth inning to the last batter. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth. I get called in there to do that. First pitch, strike swinging, second pitch, strike looking, third pitch, strike swinging. We won the game, walk off. That was fine and dandy, right? That was all driven by that self-efficacy, that internal motivation. But I remember vividly sitting in the car with my parents and my 5.5-year younger sister driving home from that game. And the thing that I was stuck on was I was pitching to the only girl in the little league.
Mm,
And my question was, why is she the only girl? That's wrong. There's something wrong about that. And that perspective plays out to where I am now in the world, trying to bring more justice and equity. It's led me to this place now where I'm deeply involved with trying to change the story with venture capital and angel investing with underrepresented founders. It's where in my coaching practice, I really love to work with people who have a different perspective and different set of experiences and background than I have. Because, hi, I'm a white male. I just for decades have wished I could bottle that confidence and that position that puts me in the world and give that to people to help enable them to succeed, right? So now I just mentioned that back to my 8-year-old self because I'm like, you're marching on this path and just give yourself grace, number one. And then secondarily, just keep marching ahead. Move to the center of that vision and it continues it'll eventually pay off. And that's what I continue to do. It's what I've always done.
awesome. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure to have a conversation with you today, my man. Keep the stoke, keep the energy high. I'm sure you don't need reminded, but hey, maybe you do. For anyone wanting to connect with Adam, you can go on to his website at adamwbarney.com. Check him out on LinkedIn. Just type in Adam W. Barney. You'll find him there. If you find yourself as an executive or entrepreneur wanting to have a cheerleader in your back pocket, I'm sure he'd be a great person to have. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been another, a thought-provoking episode. If you liked it, I don't run ads in the show. Share it with a friend, share it on social media. It's the only way the show grows. And most importantly, be well and keep persevering. Thanks so
Thank,
much.
thank you so much, Ross. It's been great being here. And also in the show notes below, I'm going to send out a link to my Energy Boost Blueprint, which is a free resource that outlines some of the strategies that my clients use to double their energy and increase productivity by 20%. So stay tuned for that as well.
Excellent. Take care. Bye now.